Fast forward to today, that whole rumor of every time Nas drops, Jay or Beyonce drops, that going on for a while, I think was still that was really happening though. That's the funny thing. That was really, really happening. And obviously Nas put a stop to that with King's Disease. Good afternoon, beautiful people. This is another episode of Album Mode. If you're listening to us for the first time, we review a new album every single week. We look at the lyrics, the production, the overall aesthetic of the album, and how that album fits into the context of that artist's career. Now, anyone watching us on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and share this video. Now, we've been doing this thing for the history of hip hop, the 50th anniversary, and looking back at some classic albums. We're going to be doing that again today. My name is Adriel Smiley, aka AdrielSmiley.com, aka Adriel Smiley Official, aka The Godfather, and we are here with His Royal Highness, King Grant.
All right, we're back, people. This time, we're with the great, some say the GOAT, Jay-Z, and his album, The Blueprint, came out in 2001, September 11th, 2001.
Yep.
When the Twin Towers fell. And I feel like that is just like one of the weirdest situations. Also, that was a Tuesday. We talked about pre-recording. We talked about it was on a Tuesday. When new music came out on Tuesdays. Which was like, that's a weird time,
different time, man.
Yeah, it's a completely different time because as we know now, as music listeners now, new music comes out on Friday. But there was a time where it was coming out on Tuesday for whatever reason, whose idea that was.
It was for the physicals. It was based on the ship date.
Oh, okay. Right. But now everybody listens to their shit online. You want to listen to your music as your weekend starts. You want to listen to music at the club. So we're dropping new music Friday. But this came out on 9/11, The Blueprint, and we would say it's a classic. I would deem it so. So we're here looking at The Blueprint, Jay-Z. How did you feel? When was the first time? Do you remember the first time you ever listened to this album?
I don't remember the first time I listened to this project. It was probably in my early teen years, like probably 12, 13, somewhere around there. But I remember this album coming out, though. I do remember this album coming out and being like a big deal. Yeah, for sure. Because this was one of Jay-Z's first big singles that kind of really crossed over. Obviously, Hard Knock Life was the one that really, cemented him in terms of being a commercial artist. But H to the Izzo, which we'll talk about later, was that was one of Jay-Z's biggest songs, still is, of course, but I remember that being like a huge deal that he did that. Now, I know all these songs I'm about to name, but for the listeners who maybe weren't born yet when this album came out, I want to paint the picture a little bit and talk about what was, the sound of music, what was popular at the time when this album came out. I'm Real, Jennifer Lopez, was huge. Fallen, Alicia Keys, Someone to Call My Lover, Janet Jackson, Hit 'Em Up Style, Blue Contrail, that's a big throwback. Let Me Blow Your Mind, Eve and Gwen Stefani, Where the Party At, Jagged Edge, Nelly, You Remind Me by Usher. So that's where music was at that time. Very much a mix of R&B and rap, taking control of things. And that's kind of where music was at that time. Now, Jay-Z, he was going through a time in his life, awaiting 2 criminal trials, one for gun possession, the other one for assault. And he mentions those a few times on this project. And
not guilty.
It's crazy to think about Jay-Z being on trial, awaiting 2 criminal trials. We don't know that Jay-Z now, but that was him in 2001. And he was also getting dissed. He had become one of hip hop's most dissed artists. Now we're gonna talk about his beef with Nas, which is maybe one of the biggest rap beefs of all time. He had a beef with Prodigy and Jadakiss as well. So at this time, a lot of turmoil, you could say, around Rockefeller and Jay-Z, awaiting 2 criminal trials, a bunch of great rappers dissing him. It wasn't all peachy like it seems to be now for Hove, but the album was a success. It sold over 427 copies in its opening week, debuting at number one and holding that spot for 3 weeks. Later certified 3 times platinum. He did an interview with Double XL in 2001, and he said, "It's the blueprint for all the songs and all the things that made you draw a conclusion about who you think I am. These are the answers." That right there, I think, is a very good encapsulation of what this project is. It says Jay-Z's sixth album. So to kind of have, your biggest point in your career come 6 albums in is pretty rare. We don't usually see that in today's, and we didn't see that then either. 6 albums in, usually you're well established. So to see Jay-Z have his biggest success 6 albums in is pretty interesting. Now, I had a couple of things here on this list of like, just I guess things from the album that I want to make sure we brought up. Starting with kind of like, the song you forgot about. I want to hear what that is for you, because this album, listening to it for the first couple times, getting ready for this, I was like, oh my goodness, like I really forgot about this album. Like as a whole, like there's songs I listen to for sure that I have in certain playlists, but as a complete album, this is probably ranking low on the list of Jay-Z albums I listen to frequently. So what's a song that you forgot about from this project?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think that I listen to Reasonable Doubt a lot. I think
That's the
probably
one for me too.
probably the most out of any Jay-Z album. I listened to Reasonable Doubt, which is really weird because it's the first one. And he has like 10, I think. 10 albums. 14. And I'm like, yeah, give me the first one. But I think for me, I want to say The Ruler's Back. Even though it's the first track, I think when I listened to The Ruler's Back, I'm trying to remember the first time I heard it, and it must have been in like Fight Night. Remember that EA boxing game? Yeah, I think The Ruler's Back. Hold on, The Ruler's Back. I'm gonna have to cut this fuck. Fight Night. Was it not in Fight Night?
Damn.
EA Fight of the Fall. Anyways, I heard it I think the last time I heard it was like in a video game or something. I'm trying to remember, but that is when I heard it, and I for whatever reason, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I very rarely listen to the Blueprint as a body of work, right? I usually have like I listen to a bunch of songs off of it. So The Ruler's Back is like, oh, like when those horns come in, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this track.
Very regal.
Yeah, so yeah, even though it's the one at the very beginning, I think because the Blueprint is, I think one of his albums where you could just take bits and pieces off of, that I have not gone back to listen from top to bottom, is like the song that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I kind of forgot that this track was on. I forgot this track was this good, and also on this project.
I'm with you. Reasonable Doubt is the one I go back to the most. I would say this might be like fifth or sixth, and if I'm ranking like Jay-Z albums I listen to, like Reasonable Doubt, 444, American Gangster, the Black Album, and then maybe Blueprint after that. But you're right. There's a lot on here that you kind of forget about, because this album was such a moment that sometimes the music on the actual album
becomes
is
secondary.
It does get left behind. What's your favorite Jay-Z song? And it doesn't have to be from this album, but I want to learn a lot about Démar Grant today by finding out what's your favorite Jay-Z song. Mine is Regrets off of Reasonable Doubt.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that song I could listen to any day, every day. But what's your favorite Jay-Z song?
Okay, so you mentioned this one to me earlier, right? I mean, you gave me the list of the questions, so I was able to contemplate them. And I think it really still comes down to Dead Presidents 2. And maybe that's just like basic. Maybe I'm basic.
That's a great answer. No, that's a great answer.
But Dead Presidents 2, its significance in just the genre overall has been, I mean, its connection to Illmatic, and I even talked about,
Mm-hmm.
the Dead Presidents Represent Me, like that portion of just like music is so immortal in
Mm-hmm.
the genre that you can beef with somebody and the person you're beefing with is like, actually, I'm gonna sample the part of your song because that part was sick. And I'm gonna make a new song on top of that. So like just to show how absolutely integral that piece of that line, how
Mm-hmm.
integral that line is to the body of hip hop is actually so crazy. So just from that situation, and then just like that song, I love that song. I love that song, and then you see there's multiple flips of it. Like even
Mm-hmm.
Logic has done a flip of it, right? Dead Presidents.
Mm-hmm.
So
J.
I think,
Cole, Drake.
yeah, like everybody, right? And that classic, it's like a classic beat, the like the keys like that dun dun dun
Mm-hmm.
dun dun dun, right? Like it's such a classic beat. So it's Dead Presidents too. I'm sorry for everybody expecting me to say something really saucy, but it's
No,
Dead
no.
Presidents too.
Dead Presidents is a great choice. And you mentioned the grip that has on the culture, for
Mm-hmm.
that line. I'm out for presidents representing me, sampling Nas, and we'll get to the Nas J beef, of course.
Yeah.
But also for this, the part of hip hop, which is a very hip hop thing, which that's a part two. The original Dead Presidents is the one that he had the video for that came
Mm-hmm.
out before the album came out. And so it's like, now years later, Dead Presidents 2 is the one we all remember, we all think of, we all know the words to. But
Yeah.
that's the idea of, the exact same beat. You did a whole new rap to put on the album, and that's what becomes popular after the first one was again popular in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think is pretty impressive. Now let's talk a bit about our favorite rap performance on this. I think that one I had to highlight because I think that this album is probably a unique listen if you're not really a Jay-Z fan, or you're too young for the Jay-Z renaissance. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
about someone who's a teenager in their early 20s. They probably have heard a million times Jay-Z is the GOAT, the greatest of all time, the GOAT rapper. And this album, I think, to hear him as the GOAT rapper, it's such a different rap style than what we are accustomed to from what we think of as good raps. A lot of these raps are kind of half speed. Like Jay-Z is not, he's not early Jay-Z. He's
Mm-hmm.
not early Jay-Z in that way. A lot slower on here. So I thought his rap performances were very interesting to highlight. But the one for me, his rap performance on here is actually Renegade from
Oh,
Eminem. I
I'm
I
just stealing
I
my shit, bro. Come on.
oh, we're on the same page. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll let you cook because I'm gonna get to it later. So tell us about Renegade by Eminem.
Yeah, Eminem, I think I remember when this not first came out, but like after it came out and like people are talking about the, discourse around Renegade and trying to figure out who was who was better on the track, right? And there was a war back and forth, and also Jay-Z is black, Eminem is white. There's gonna be a little, it's a little bit more contentious, just even in that sense, right? We're still talking about top 5 of all time, top 10 of all time, whatever. Um, so there's always been that little battle, but I always felt that Eminem was cooking him in the end. I didn't feel like Eminem was cooking him, and it's not even like a bad like coming at you type of cooking. I just felt like
Mm-hmm.
Eminem was just going crazy, with the whistling Dixie when it even has like the whistle in it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I just thought that Eminem was doing, these are two lyricists, right? So again, greatest of all time type lyricists going, blow for blow, and I just felt like Eminem came out on top. I'm sorry.
I'm with you on that one. That's kind of why I had to highlight it too. I'm happy we're on the same page because
Mm-hmm.
it feels good when we kind of bring up the exact same lyrics or the exact same section.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about this song that is really interesting is one, Eminem produced it,
Yes.
underrated
Yeah,
as a
yeah, yeah.
producer. He does not get enough credit as a producer, and as well, this album basically has no features. Basically, no features.
Mm-hmm.
Eminem is the lone feature on this thing. And once you hear Jay-Z rap for basically 50 minutes before Eminem gets in, it is almost refreshing to hear a different tone, a different voice. But what stands out right away is he can hang. he could
Mm-hmm.
more than hang, and so that is what's so cool about that collaboration is like, yeah, they're two god level rappers. They're both at the peak. I would say Eminem was scorching at
Yeah,
this time in 2001. But to hear
they
them
both were
together,
though.
for sure, for sure. Eminem was hotter for sure,
Yes, he was.
but they were both scorching at that time. That was a collab that the world wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like there have been a few times in hip hop history when there's a collab the whole world is waiting for, the whole world wants, and they deliver.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those times. So had to highlight Renegade. And then last but not least, before we actually talk about the
Wait, hold on.
production
I
and
want to say
flow,
one more thing about Renegade.
let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Eminem on the hook was actually really good, which is kind of like you don't Eminem is, your rappers,
I'm,
rappers, rappers, rappers.
he's in my lyric section. Don't give it away. He's in my lyric section, okay?
But him on the hook was actually really good. The handoff between
Mm-hmm.
him and Jay-Z was good, but I do feel like Eminem's vocals are better in that situation. The Renegade, like I thought that was awesome. Um yeah, and he even does like the or like he's adding a lot of elements where I feel like Jay-Z is just rapping it, where
Mm-hmm.
Eminem is like, let me give you elements after element after element. So I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry. I feel like I need to step away from the mic after saying this, but I think I don't want to say he didn't wash him. He didn't wash
But
him.
he outdid him.
He outdid him. He outdid him.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
I,
how I
I
feel
want to
about
hear
it.
what people think. I'm sure we have some listeners who are hearing Renegade for the first time on this
Mm-hmm.
podcast and are new to even the idea of this being a thing. Who do
Yeah.
you think watch who? If you're first time hearing Renegade and you're new to this song, I want to know. Let's know in the comments, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
who watched who. Me and Démar know what side we're on, but I want to know what everyone thinks. Now, this I want to get from you as well, and we can head into production after this. Favorite production on here. It was so hard for me to choose because there's so much different sounds, so much kind of iconic sounds on here. Some of these beats are like, almost core memories to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
hip hop fans. And this was a time when the producer was king. I think Metro and maybe Hit Boy are probably the only two producers now who have this effect. But back in those days, the producer might as well have been a feature. It was
Mm-hmm.
like a big deal to have, oh, this is Jay-Z and Timbo, or
Or Just
Jay-Z and
Blaze.
Swiss, or Jay-Z and Just Blaze. Like, there was a huge deal for you to have that song with that producer. They would always get a shout out on the song. You might rap a little different than you used to. Those days are long gone, long gone. But the song that I thought of, and probably my favorite production on here, is Ola Ovito,
Oh, really? Wow.
because that's just such a different sound than what would be happening now. Like that production is not something I see the top rappers doing now. And for that to be your big producer song, such a different energy. That's not one of the more, I guess, hype songs on the project. And
Mm-hmm.
this 2001, this album is 22 years old. This is one of the things that I think ages well is that people don't do the song anymore about yourself and your nicknames and your aliases. If you
Mm-hmm.
think about all the songs Snoop had that were referencing Doggy Style, talking about him as being the dog and all his nicknames, people don't do that anymore. Kendrick does
Right.
not have any song calling himself like that are called Kenny and talking about him being called Kenny. Drake does not have any songs that are called The Boy, and that's the course of the song. But this was the era where you did that. Talk about DMX, Ja Rule, 50, Jay, there's Ola Ovito, Jigga That Nigga. That was a thing that people did back in the day where you did a good job of referencing yourself, your alter egos, your nicknames. So that's kind of why I like Ola Ovito, because there's no way you're not seeing Future have these songs called Hendrix where that's like the chorus, and he's getting the crowd to yell out Hendrix. That's
Mm-hmm.
not people don't do that no more. And so I think that is why it's my favorite, because it's very hip hop. A lot of old heads say hip hop has changed and it's not hip hop anymore. This in this sense, they're right. That is such a very hip hop thing where your aliases and your nicknames are song names.
Yeah.
Those days are done.
Yeah. Can you imagine a song Drizzy? And then another song, The Boy.
Drake has so many nicknames. Like
Yeah.
Drake, think about how much albums or songs Drake could have with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. But what's your favorite production from here?
So this one is gonna catch people off guard, I think. I think Girls, Girls, Girls Part 2. I love that.
Interesting.
I actually, if I'm keeping it real, I think it's better than the original version.
Why do you think that's to catch people off guard? I thought that was common
The
knowledge.
second part, really? I don't think so. Maybe I'm in
Really,
a
because that's the one that I've played more like since albums come out. Like I always play the part two. Like
yeah.
part one is kind of like
I feel like part one is because that one did chart, right? Like all of his singles charted for this, right? But I think that one is kind of like that one says that Girls, 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 the first one, the hook, Jay-Z singing the hook, that is one of those moments where you could tell like that's where it dates itself. Like I don't feel like much of his music is very dated at all, actually. I just think it's like this is old school hip hop. 2001 is old school hip hop now, guys. This is 22 years ago. But I think it's like an older school of hip hop, but him singing on it, I'm like, that's not good. Like, is the genre we have progressed to the point where if you're singing, you have to at least sing mediocrely. I feel like he is not singing even to mediocre levels. Okay, it's like a 3 out of 10 type of deal. So that kind of like hurts the song for me. And in the second one, where he has the women doing that person, the girls, 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 like that part is really awesome. And also just like it's a really playful beat in the background, and it's got this like really I don't know, it's more playful in the sense of the song, and I think I don't know, it's more fun, which is
way more fun.
Yeah, and I think Jay-Z doesn't do fun a lot. I think he does cool very well, obviously.
Yes.
But he doesn't really do fun a lot. Like even in Big Pimpin', like that was kind of like a fun track, but he even said that he didn't like that he did that song.
Yeah.
So, to hear him on this fun track, Kanye West produced. This was big when Kanye West producing. Like this was huge moments for Kanye. To be producing on Blueprint. This is actually one of the better. It's my favorite produced one, even though it's liking Kanye right now is not kosher. I'm not really Kanye. I can tell you right now, we are doing this album because I vetoed College Dropout, people.
Yeah.
Okay, so but I do like this track. This is probably my favorite produced track.
I'm interested to see what the actual consensus is of like people liking one or two better, because I've always liked two better. To me, I'm like one. It's not, I won't say it's skippable, but like if you got a choice to listen to one, you're listening to two for sure. So I think that's a good choice out of those two for sure.
Maybe the second one is like more complex or something. Like I'm trying to figure out why the first one would be like, oh, we're gonna push the first one instead of the second one, because he's pushed a number 2 before. Dead Presidents 2 is more popular than the first one. So I'm trying to
I wonder why that was. I think it was probably some politics in terms of who produced the first one. That would be my guess. Because I think that the number 2 actually fits the album better. Because there's a whole bunch of soul samples on here. This is like, listen, if you're on the internet at all talking music, you've heard about the soul sample era. It started right here. This album is where it started. Kanye has said a bunch of times how he started it and Just Blaze was copying his beats. Now, I wasn't there to dissuade that or confirm that, but a lot of the big songs on here that production wise have stood the test of time are the Kanye ones. Heart of the City, H to the Izzo. I want to talk H to the Izzo for a second because I mentioned on the top that was like the breakthrough from this one. That was the single. That was the first single, and that was popping. Like I don't know how many of y'all remember what it was like in 2001, but that single played outside a lot. And he samples Jackson 5. I Want You Back. Got to be one of the most iconic samples of all time, because to sample a song bigger than that song, is pretty rare. It's like sample a song everyone knows like that was not always the thing to do with sampling. I think we see that now more in the present.
Yeah.
You see some people sample a very popular song where everyone knows the sample, but back in those days, you were sampling some obscure shit. You're
Yeah.
sampling some stuff like we never heard of before.
Like
So
your
for him to
grandparents
sample
heard of.
Jack, basically, and for him to sample Jackson 5, I Want You Back, very, very interesting. I
Mm.
think Izzo, Hova, that song is the tempo of a lot of this project. And that's kind of why I want to highlight it, because you said he doesn't do fun. The
Mm.
tempo is part of him not doing fun. Jay-Z ain't trying to speed nothing up. He ain't trying to have you dancing too much. Like, these are all really two-step songs. Like, you
Yeah.
could two-step to it, maybe get some high knees if you really want to, but he's not, gonna get a little too crazy. So I think Izzo is probably the song from this project that people remember the most, I would say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you talk about the production influence of this project, Izzo is the one that really, really set the tone, because these other songs on here that also are very, very sample influenced, a lot of these are B-sides. These are
Mm.
like deep cuts. You had to buy the CD to know some of these songs. But Izzo was the
Yeah.
single. You saw that everywhere. 106 in Park, that was
Oh,
everywhere.
106 in Park. Shout out 106 in Park.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the good old days. Yeah, I think that I think that the producers he has on this allows the blueprint to not sound like it came out in 2001, because you can be like, what was also coming out in this time, like something by like Diplomats, like if
Yep.
you like, you can tell like that was made in 2003. But
For sure.
right, so um like if you hear a Jadakiss song, you're like, ah, yes, 2005, this is it, but by having, Just Blaze, Timberland, Kanye West, who else was on it? I guess Bink. Shout out to Bink.
Shout out
Um,
Bink. Yeah. Trackmasters,
yeah. So they have
Eminem.
heavy hitters, but this was before Kanye West was a heavy hitter.
Mm-hmm.
Kanye West was kind of like, oh yeah, that guy is like, he's really good with the chipmunk samples. Um, so it's his, but this is a credit to him. Producer selection is off the charts. You're choosing the right dudes, my guy.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get Kanye West, Just Blaze, Timberland, and Eminem to produce for you, I think you're doing a great job in beat selection. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that yeah, I think that's one of the biggest deals for the when it comes to production of the blueprint is like heavy, 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 heavy hitters, and they know what they're doing. They like, I feel like they, especially people like Kanye, not making music for today. He's making, it's like, yo, this shit is gonna bang 3,000 years from now. So I want that shit to slap in 5023. I want them to still be playing this, right? So that's what happens, and that's what helps create things like Izzo and Girls, 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 Heart of the City. Like, can still play that shit today, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best thing about this entire album.
You mentioned it on the Nas review we did of Illmatic, of
Mm-hmm.
how so much of that album you play now and it sounds crispy as ever.
Mm-hmm.
This you Jay-Z is on that same wave. On that same wave. This was very much ahead of its time. We're talking about the soul samples. There's a sample on here that's not very soulful in
Mm-hmm.
Takeover. Um that was
Do you
the
like
song I
Takeover?
kind of I don't really like Takeover, honestly.
Yeah, I mean
I'm
neither.
not yeah, it's funny because Takeover and Ether both weren't great songs.
Yeah.
So it's like, think about that battle now. It's like compared to Back to Back by Drake, which like played in the club and
Mm-hmm.
goes up, where it's like Takeover and Ether are both not great songs.
Mm-hmm.
But um that sample on Takeover was, some of Kanye's influence of like, we have all these soul samples over here, kind of these like chipmunk sounds, biting the explosive drums. Takeover was the one sample that's like, this is like going to war, like
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
what this sample is for. And I think, like, again, talk about production, the time that Jay-Z is in at this time, the ruler's back as the intro makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's almost like preparing for war, because it's like, I might go to jail, I might not. Everyone's coming at me. I worked my way to get here. And then when you hear Takeover, Takeover is, to start off, is like, okay, he's really going in right now. Like, this is really happening.
Yeah,
So
what about it? Give me the sounds. Tell me the sounds. It's got like the buzzy. It's got like
yeah,
buzzy like guitar.
it's, well, one it's that marching snare. That marching
Mm-hmm.
snare, which is like, if anyone's heard that song, it's directly from the sample, which I think was a great choice from him. The yeah, that you hear every once in a while. Again, it's kind of like a war chant of people like backing him up. And
Mm-hmm.
then I guess he would call it horns, or maybe organs. I'm not totally sure, but those that go in and out, and they especially come in during the chorus. But the dun 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 na na na,
Yeah.
it's like, those things on their own, regardless of what Jay-Z actually is saying on the track, put you in that mode of like, one, we're marching, and two, it's about to go down. Like, this is probably the soundtrack that might have been playing on that ferry when they pulled up in Montgomery. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
what this song is for. So for Kanye to, I guess, paint the picture in that sense and make it really fit that, speaks volumes, because we're now 20 years removed from this, and we've heard plenty of diss songs. All these diss songs have the feeling of we're going to war, or have the feeling of it's about to go down. They just sound like rap songs. And maybe
Yeah.
the person on the song gets a little crazy, but this is one of the times when, production wise, you really see that, like, that marching snare is just can't be beat. And one thing I do want to mention about this project, because again, this is a different time. Like, 2001, a whole different time.
Yeah.
At this point, the R&B and hip hop charts were one chart. So in terms of singles, they were one chart. I know now
Mm-hmm.
we have the R&B charts, the hip hop singles
You
chart.
know, it actually kind of make more sense to do that today with the way that the genres cross over, but we're happy to have two charts. We're enjoying our two
and
charts.
and the crazy thing about having two charts was that, like, you remember this, early 2000s, R&B ruled. Like,
Yeah.
all the biggest songs were R&B. So a lot of these artists would have maybe a number one album, but not a number one song.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, this whole album being very soul influenced, I think that has something to do with that. I haven't heard anyone mention that, but I think that has to play a part, because, the number one song at the time when this album came out was Fallen by Alicia Keys.
Right.
It's like, you can't H to the Izzo and Fallen by Alicia Keys, two different genres, So I think that's a huge part of this album as a whole, sonically. But Takeover, they they knew the assignment with that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I like your R&B element because you think about like Heart of the City where by using the sample it adds
Mm-hmm.
like the singing to his song. So it makes it an artificial crossover in that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's a rap song, rap or hip hop and R&B. It's kind of like a tempo difference and people are singing versus rapping, but allowing that the basically a sung hook into the track make it like a joining point, right? So you can kind of see like, oh, there's a little bit, ain't no love in the heart of the city. I'm like, oh, okay, there's a little bit
A
of
little something there.
yeah, there's a little melody to this in this entire track that's kind of more of just like a straight up rap song, right? So there are elements like that that I really really enjoy. But overall the production phenomenal, bro. And I think that like the songs like Heart in the City are one of those tracks that it's like a flashback when you listen to Heart in the City.
Yeah, actually, it takes you back in
Right? That
time.
it's like really we talked about this on Illmatic where I'm like, some of the songs are like you're in New York. And I feel like Heart of the City is kind of one of those songs where it's like quintessential New
Mm-hmm.
York track with the like the guitar again, the sample, the sung hook, and like it sounds like you're prowling walking down the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's called Heart of the City. So there's a lot of tracks like that, Renegade. I mean, there's a lot of dedication. You know what I'm realizing just speaking out loud is like a lot of dedication to the guitar
Yeah,
in yeah on this album. Even Renegade, that's guitar driven at the very very beginning. Yeah. So I guess
yeah,
we're kind of coming full circle on that in hip hop, where the guitar is now one of the most prominent instruments.
yeah, honestly. And I think the sequencing of the production, I think, is part of it as well. You mentioned Heart of the City.
Hmm.
Right after Heart of the City is Never Change, Song Cry, and All I Need. Song Cry, I think, is one of the production standouts.
Yeah, Drake
Just
sample.
because say it again.
Drake sampled it.
Yeah, yeah. I thought you said it was a Drake sample. I'm like, Drake was a
No, no,
kid at this
no.
time.
Drake
But
sampled it.
Drake did sample it, and "Song Cry" is one of those kind of songs in hip hop history that people always bring up because this song is an emotional song. That's it's the whole song. There's no like just an emotional bar, just the chorus. That's the whole song. And my favorite part is the sample
Hmm.
of that woman like singing over Jay-Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that carries so much of the song where it's like the drums are probably the most simple drums on this whole album. Those drums are very much like a basic 4 count. Like
Hmm.
when you first start learning to play the drums, that's basically what you start playing. And the actual sonics of this woman's voice carries so much of that record. And then the one I really wanted to highlight was Never Change. It's probably one of my most played songs from this album.
Oh wow, okay.
Um,
That was a
and
skippable
I
for me.
wow, doesn't like
Yeah.
Never Change. Never
Yeah.
Change is fits in with what I was saying about how a lot of these songs are slow.
Hmm.
But talk about the use of samples and chopping on this. The different, I guess, uses of Never Change. Like there's a beginning when it's just never, 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 never change. And then later on is never change.
Hmm.
Never change. That's something we don't see as much anymore. I think it aged well in terms of not sounding outdated, but in terms of a sample using different variations of the same phrase,
Yeah.
in the sampling, that's not something we see all the time. And Never Change was a good example of that because that's also a song where he says it as well. Like Jay-Z says Never Change a lot as well as a sample. That's not something you always see where the person is like repeating what the sample is saying per se, but this is one of those moments where it is a lot of that. Like the samples yelling Never Change all over Jay's vocals. And that's of course him talking about how he'll never change. So yeah, never Change is one of those ones for me that I look at as like one of the better songs from this project.
Wow. Well, I'm happy for you and you feel that way because I was like, that did not make it for me. That did not make it for me.
Maybe you be changing too much.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I changed too much and I can't connect with it anymore.
I'm
Um,
screaming.
yeah. All I Need is also a really good one. I want to bring
Mm-hmm.
that one up, but I think
Him,
the female vocalists that
yes.
keep getting brought up in the songs are really really doing a lot of work for Jay-Z. I feel
Mm-hmm.
getting women to sing certain parts really adds an extra dimension to his music because Jay-Z is one of the goats,
Mm-hmm.
but he is strictly a rapper. So you kind of have
Yes.
to assemble the pieces around him to make sure that like a very good song comes out. Because if it's just him alone, then you're reduced just to his lyrical ability,
Mm-hmm.
which is prodigious. But it's
Yes.
only one element among many elements that can exist in a singular song. So even in just like all I need just to have that like just like sprouting out at certain points is really helping the song move forward and also in the chorus and stuff. So yeah, it sounds good. I think it's this is like 90, not even 90s, early 2000s New York hip hop. This is what it sounds like. This is what it should
Mm-hmm.
sound like. Is that is it okay to say that? It should sound like this. But yeah, I think that this is, one of the 2000s hip hop, we get a lot of we talk about the bling era and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
and the damage the bling era did.
God damn.
I
For
would
real
say
though.
I would say that this is one of the saving graces of 2000s production.
For sure. You talked about him being strictly a rapper and
Hmm.
what that says for his music. There was that joke they used to always say is like, if you want to get Jay-Z to take your beat, make sure there's a hook on it. So
Hmm.
it falls right in line with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, I do have some lyrics I want to get to, but first, I do want us to talk a little bit about this Nas versus Jay-Z versus Mobb Deep, thing, because he puts this song Takeover, which is, you know, essentially a diss song straight, like nothing else we can call it. He puts that on his album as the first song after the intro. That's not something we see today at all, and we haven't really seen much in general. Like diss songs usually might be like a Lucy
Hmm.
or something like that, but how did you feel about this beef? Were you aware when it was happening at the time? And like, you know, do you think Jay-Z won? You think Nas won? Like, where are you at with this? Because everyone has their own opinion.
So I think I was like a small kid. So I wasn't deep in the trenches of the Nas versus Jay-Z beef when it was happening. I think I think Takeover, like it's weird because I'm like I don't feel like Takeover is as strong of a diss track. Like I think it's I think it's longer, but like I don't feel like oh got him or even that it was even as culturally impactful. Like I guess it technically is because Jay-Z became the bigger artist. Takeover is still like a serious song, but we still say you ethered him,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a difference. So I think that, it's like it's good in a diss track sense as like an actual song, not really. But I think that is where it's sequenced, I think that it's a risk because if it's not like decent at least, then you just kind of like, you're starting off your album, you're taking one foot, like you're taking one step and instantly stepping into a puddle.
Yeah,
So big risk, but I think it paid off because it was good enough to be like, okay, it can live. And also the beef was like huge. So, and to have
big
an actual
beef.
response that everybody's going to listen to because
Mm-hmm.
it's the second song, um, was a risk, but worth it. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, big shout out to Arby's for the big beef, but I think that it was such a risk, but I feel like at that point you're really making statements.
Hmm.
Like y'all not gonna just talk about me. I'm not gonna reply. Like I'm here. That it was really that kind of energy, and I think too, like if you actually hear what he's saying on the song,
Hmm.
these aren't really big disses. Like at one point he says that you haven't made a hot album since Elmatic. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not really hitting him as hard. He then says that he knows things about Nas that he doesn't want to share,
Hmm.
which is like that's interesting. But I think what I really have thought about in our, re-listen to this, doing this review is I understand how big of a deal it must have been for Jay-Z at that time. Because Prodigy, Nas, Jadakiss, those guys are arguably, if not on the same level as Jay-Z, more
Hmm.
bigger than Jay-Z, like in terms of totality of their careers. Definitely Nas. Nas was the golden child,
Yeah.
from the time he came in. Prodigy and Mobb Deep, like they were, in the midst of their prime. Jadakiss had big songs at that point already. So I feel like, he kind of had to respond in a sense,
Hmm.
and it was a big deal for him as like he's becoming bigger. It's like, okay, these big artists, I can't let these big artists punk me because I'm also a big artist. I'm also a big dog. So I thought it was very interesting. And then if you fast forward to today, that whole rumor of every time Nas drops, Jay or Beyonce drops, that going on for a while, I think was still that was really happening though. That's the funny thing. That was really, really happening. And obviously Nas put a stop to that with King's Disease and
Hmm.
that whole series. Jay-Z does not want that smoke. But it's interesting to see now where both their careers have ended up because at that time, Jay-Z being bigger than Nas was like impressive.
Yeah.
Like that was very, very impressive. When Jay-Z put his first album out, Nas was already a god, you know,
Yeah.
and Jay-Z was kind of the upstart. So to see where they both ended up and having huge careers, That's been pretty impressive. And I think that their beef did a lot to affect the beefs going forward, even more than I say Biggie and Pac. I think Biggie and Pac was the extreme, and that was always a caution for a lot of people of like, let's not, you know,
Take it
take
to
it
this
that
level.
far. Let's not, go that far. But I think when it came to like, Nas and Hove, they were two rappers on this elite level of rapping, and it was almost as if like no one wanted to lose. There was no way I was gonna lose. I'm gonna respond. I'm gonna say whatever I gotta say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lose. And I think that had a lot of effect on how beefs went on, um, going forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a crazy that even happened, but you know,
Some good lines did come out of
legendary
it though.
beef.
He's like, he's like, niggas will kidnap your baby, spit at your lady. We bring knife to fist fight. Kill your drama. We kill
Mm-hmm.
your motherfucking ants with a sledgehammer. Don't let me do it to you, Dunny, cause I overdo it. I like that a lot. The idea the sledgehammer versus the ants thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is a great example of overdoing. You don't need to. You don't need to do that. The fuck? So the imagery, very good. But I didn't feel like there are bars in there. Every
Mm-hmm.
song has bars because it's Jay Z. But I think that that in particular was like, oh wow, this guy's really going. He's really going over the top for it. I thought that was pretty funny. Which is funny is not really again not really Jay Z's not really going for funny. Um,
Yeah.
but he
No.
doesn't. He's going for funny a little
Mm.
bit on this album, which is something that should be noted at least. Not super cool all the time.
Last thing before I get to some more lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of times on here where, if this was 2023, Jay-Z would have been canceled. There's an R bomb on
Yeah.
the there's R bomb early. He calls Nas the F word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but a bunch of things that obviously are from a complete different time.
Yeah. 2001, 22 years ago.
But the thing that I think is so interesting is that he mentions these guys by name. That is
Yes.
not something we see that often. The second verse, he literally starts it out by saying, I don't care if you mob deep, I hold triggers to cruise. Like, that I think is what made this hold the weight that it did.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like he calls him by name. He calls Nas nasty Nas. He calls him Esco. It's like y'all gonna know who I'm talking about. So I think that is pretty cool. I have some lyrics to cover if you're done with production. Do you have any other production notes you want to cover?
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to say about Takeover, where um, back then, if you diss somebody by name, you had to wait until their next release coming out. They can't you
Yeah. Well, there was the radio. The radio is what it was.
yeah, you could have gone on the radio, gonna like I don't even know the New York is like
It
I
was
don't
it was
know.
Hot 97 during those
High
times.
97. And you could have gone and done like a quick interview and just like flame somebody in an interview or something like that on the radio. But really, if somebody's gonna come back at you, you gotta wait like a year, 2 years because unless they're gonna just drop a single for the disc, it's probably gonna be on the album, which people were back then had a legit album cycle. So it could have been like it could have been like a year or 2 years before you even hear
Mm-hmm.
from somebody else responding in the diss track, right? So the shit like that. So you can kind of say somebody's name and not expect a response for like a year, right? You say
True.
somebody's name today, you're gonna hear about it literally at 12:15 a.m. after they hear it, and then they tweet or Instagram live or whatever, respond
Mm-hmm.
on social media. So it's pretty funny. You got that time frame allows you to like just call people out by name and be like, yo, they're not gonna say shit. Like what? Hear
Mm-hmm.
from you in a year, buddy. See you later, fam. But
That's
that's
really what it was, man.
yeah. So that's something that I do enjoy about older school hip hop where you can kind of just call people out by name and like what are you gonna do? Can't say anything.
Yeah, I didn't mention it earlier, but now that you brought that up, that's why I think a lot of people thought that Jay-Z lost as well, because I don't know if people remember this, but at the time he ended up going on Hot 97. I think it was Andrew Martinez he was talking
Mm-hmm.
to, if I remember correctly. And kind of explained himself and was just saying like why he didn't go further, why there's not more. And it's like going on the radio to explain yourself during a beef sounds like you lost, you know? But that's a very 2001 thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way I can see Meek Mill heading up to the Breakfast Club during the beef to, explain himself. So you're right. That made it even better that you could really name guys. And you had some distance between the next release before it got really real.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we mentioned it before. One of my favorite songs on this, Renegade.
Yeah.
Um, this song I think is very much forgotten about because
Yeah.
2020 2023 the Eminem slander is running rampant. And when you hear a song like Renegade, you think about this is a guy everyone's slandering. Because to this day, there are not many guys who can hang with Eminem rap wise.
Mm-hmm.
And that has always been his calling card. But this was Slim Shady kind of at his peak controversy. Like, calling out the names of celebrities in his songs, being rude to people on red carpets,
Mm-hmm.
Even saying stuff about his fans. He was Doja Cat before Doja Cat. Like, he was really getting it. And on Renegade, he doesn't shy away from that. It's really like still there. Let's see if I have what it takes to rap this part of Renegade. In verse 2, he says, "But that ain't the case. See, it's a matter of taste. We as people decide if Shade is as bad as they say he is, or is he the latter, a gateway to escape, media scapegoat, who they can be mad at today? See, it's as easy as cake, simple as whistling Dixie, while I'm waving the pistol at 60 Christians against me. Go to war with the Mormons, take a bath with the Catholics in holy water. No wonder they're trying to hold me under longer. I'm a motherfucking spiteful, delightful, Eiffel, the new Ice Cube. Motherfuckers hate to like you. What did I do? I'm just a kid from the gutter."
Mm-hmm.
That right there is just M at his finest. At his finest. Coming for the Christians. Like if you want someone to come for the Christians, Eminem is your guy
Yeah.
on the front lines. And this is, he says, we as a people decide if Shay's as bad as they say he is. And that's kind of why I said he's the original Doja Cat, because there was all this talk about he's such a bad influence, and he was saying to his fans, "Yo, chill out, like
Mm-hmm.
be yourself, do your thing." Now, of course, Eminem lives a different life than a lot of his fans. I
Yep.
think that played a part in it, but that was really the discourse at that time was like, is Eminem a bad influence? Is he, hurting the kids' mind, sort of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so, to see him bring that back on this track with Jay-Z is, I want to say it's refreshing because he talked about it all the time, but it is refreshing because it's a different perspective than Jay-Z's coming, at it all. Jay-Z's turmoil is very different. He has legal troubles, rappers dissing him, people questioning him. Eminem, whole different issues than what Jay-Z's going through.
He's
And
fighting
so
the
to hear
public.
him, yeah, literally fighting the public tooth and nail. And so to see him talk about it on this song, I thought was so cool. I forgot that he called himself the new Ice Cube.
Mm-hmm.
And then that line, "Motherfuckers hate to like you," spot on,
Yeah.
spot on. And again, these are the things I think that age well from this project is. First of all, Eminem is a one of one. That's not questionable. Never will be an Eminem again. Never was before. But Eminem's way of dealing with the public and the public perception so different than people do now. Obviously, it's very more sensitive time.
Mm-hmm.
You could get canceled at any moment. But putting it in
He
his
was just like,
raps,
fight back. Like, I'm fighting back, bro. Like, you coming for me?
fighting
Okay, I'm
back
coming for you.
in his raps.
Yeah.
Every single I think about a song like "Sing for the Moment" where he says the line about like, can I shoot the gun for you?
Mm-hmm.
Because we were saying that, talking about guns is making kids buy guns. And it's like, I can't think of a rapper that would like put their controversy in their lyrics like Eminem does.
Yeah.
Even you think about the way Jay-Z did it, the whole album, you're like, okay, he mentions some things, some tidbits in there. Then Eminem starts rapping, and you're like, oh, this is different. Okay, okay. So I just wanted to highlight M because the Eminem slander is running rampant.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I get it.
They forgot that he
But
was that nice like that. He was very nice.
he was that guy to get
Yeah.
on a song with, a lot of people consider the GOAT and kind of do him
Outdoing him.
dirty. That ain't no secret. That ain't no surprise. That ain't no accident. So I gotta give Eminem his credit.
Yeah, I think there's Jay-Z is basically somebody that you can just rely. I feel like you could rely on him to say something very interesting in every song. Um and even in, I think that him versus Eminem is almost like it's like a sparring match, not even like a boxing match. It was just like, let me do this and then do that, and then okay, it's like I knew that was coming. Let me try this. And I think he even does that on Breathe Easy, which is also called Lyrical Exercise, where
Mm-hmm.
this is in verse 2 where he's like, suckers, get your weight up, not your hate up. Jigga Man is diesel. When I lift the 8 up. Y'all ain't ready to work out with the boy. Your flow your flow is preying on drugs. Mine is rap on steroids. I lift every voice when I sing. My ability. Make yours like an exercise in utility. Bring your squad, biceps, triceps, and quads. We don't struggle with underdeveloped muscles. Y'all ain't ready, y'all Achilles heels, right? Same routine when you see me, you know the drill. I spot you. Um, so there you go. Remember, I think I don't know how many people remember, but like your brain on drugs, that PSA
Yep.
advert. So for him to pull in that reference and then it's like, yeah, but mine's like, my so your rap, your flow is brain on drugs, and my rap is rap on steroids, right? It's a great parallel, right? And then there's like bring your squad, biceps, triceps, and quads. We don't struggle with underdeveloped muscle. I don't feel like he's trying to be funny, but I just think that the things like in this case is like it's just like a funny line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we don't struggle with underdeveloped muscle. Y'all ain't real. Y'all Achilles heel. That's great. Real Achilles heel, the internal rhyme, right? And then also the association to the working out. So like I said, every song you go to for Jay-Z, there's gonna be something, right? We could seriously just sit here, like, okay, song one, song two, song three, and just pick and pick and pick and pick. So this for me is more of just like trying to find like, oh, this is like funny or really interesting or like a cool
Mm-hmm.
concept. The brain on drugs thing is like a cool concept. And you don't really hear people all rapping like that.
And then even after that, the bring your squad like biceps, triceps, quads, like
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4, and it's like Jay Z has these little things that are kind of clever in his writing. And that's so
Mm-hmm.
often. We talked about Alien on the J Hus review and how we sit on topic and he had every alien simile and
Yeah.
literary device you could think of. This is really that for Jay Z, like he finds every way to talk about the body and the different body parts, like talking from one of the brain on drugs to steroids, undeveloped muscles to y'all Achilles heel, and it's like it is very impressive that he doesn't write. That's always going to be impressive. He's very much to blame for this new era of people not writing their
Mm-hmm.
lyrics. But when you highlight stuff like this, you know, these are the things that not everyone is doing. Like some of y'all need to write to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
Only Jay-Z can really do this on a freestyle. So I like that lyrical exercise was one of the songs that I forgot about was on here at all. I'm not gonna lie to you. When that song came on, I was like, this is on here? Like
Mm-hmm.
totally forgot that song was on there. My last bit of lyrics is Never Change. And I just highlighted this part because this whole section is just very 2001 to me.
Okay.
Very 2001 to me. Now on verse 2, he says, "We can get paper longer than Pippin's arms. Plead the fifth when it comes to the fam. I'm like a dog, I never speak, but I understand. Where my dog's at, where my soldiers at war, where your ball's at. Whoa, gotta pause that. Lost 92 bricks, had to fall back. Knocked a nigga off his feet, but I crawled back. Had A1 credit, got more crack. Let's start from the top. Longer than Pippin's arms,
Mm-hmm.
very 2001. I think Pippin had just gone to the Blazers.
Yeah.
Like, very, very much in our minds of like, he's a star. You're not hearing
Mm-hmm.
Pippin references now. If you're hearing references from any like retired players, it's Kobe, Mike, maybe like Larry Bird. It ends there.
Mm-hmm.
Then he talks about where my dog's at. It's DMX. They were on the same label. We may talk about their beef a little bit later, but always been linked, tied together, both from New York, both big artists.
Mm-hmm.
Where my dog's at is not as much a common phrase we use as much today. Obviously it still fits. We know what it means, but do you tell me when last time you heard someone say where my dog's
My
at?
dogs.
Not often. Not often.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta give Jay-Z his credit, and this feels weird to say, but he said pause. Pausing 22 years ahead of its time. He's from New York. New York is the origin of
Mm-hmm.
pausing things. But to hear, Jay-Z pause something in 2001, very, very interesting. And then at the end, he talks about lost 92 bricks had to fall back. Those 92 bricks are, folklore in Jay-Z's world. If
Mm-hmm.
anyone is a Jay-Z fan or you're not a Jay-Z fan, those 92 bricks have been talked about over and over and over again. And that's something he does over and over on this project. I want to highlight this part because those 92 bricks is like, if you just hear someone say 92 bricks, you're like, oh, Jay-Z, when I'm sure many people have lost several bricks. But
Yeah.
that's just part of his story. And he has so many parts in this album where he talks about his story, his upbringing. He mentions Reasonable Doubt, I think, 3 times on
Yep.
here. Like, artists talking about themselves in that way, it's not something I'm hearing that often now. He's referencing his old work, his old stuff, like very much as if he is an historical figure already.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I would describe it. And I think like that's part of his success is like treating himself like a historical figure, like these are important because they happened to me. These are important because it is me. And then last but not least, maybe my favorite part of this verse is when he said, had A1 credit, got more crack. Crack still exists, but this was the time when everyone was selling crack. All the drug dealing rappers you hear today, not as much crack talk.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much crack talk. So, just to hear them talk about crack, I think is really kind of emblematic of the times because I'm sure there are plenty of drug dealing rappers right now who are still selling drugs,
Mm-hmm.
free slime.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's doing it. But how often do you hear these guys talk about crack? Not that often. When I think about a crack bar, I think about Young Thug talking about the crack, like his butthole crack.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think about when I think crack. So just shout out to Jay-Z, man. Shout out to Jay-Z for, giving a shout out to crack.
Oh my god. One thing you did say that that really interests me is that the talking about historical figures, how he almost considers himself a historical figure already.
Mm-hmm.
But he is also willing to like reference others where it's like this is in Izzo, Hova, right? This is on verse 2 where he's like, I do this for the culture to let them know what a nigga look like when a nigga in a roadster. Show them how to make a move in a room full of vultures. Industry shady. It need to be taken over. Label owners hate me. I'm raising the status quo up. I'm overcharging niggas for what they did to Cold Crush. Pay us what you owe us
Mm-hmm.
for all these years you hold us. We can talk, but money talks, so talk more bucks. Um, I don't know. I don't even at that time. I don't even know how many people really know who the Cold Crush brothers are. But current
Mm-hmm.
today, that's like they live in obscurity at this point. But he is able to like to really go back and draw on the Cold Crush brothers. Into like his reverence for the people that came before him is something that that we at least have to acknowledge because like Cold Crush brothers was like 79.
Yeah, that's the beginning. Yeah.
Like this was before. I don't even think that I don't know if they ever fully like they must have like recorded their music, but for him to reference it in this way, but just like to see to show you what we're talking about, like there's black and white pictures of the Cold Crush
Mm-hmm.
brothers, right? So like those exist. Um, yeah. So for him to to this isn't his hit song where he's basically trying to be like, yo, we need to get the money back for the people that got screwed. It's a little political, a little conscious. Where we're like in the hit song.
Mm-hmm.
In the hit song, we're talking about do this for the culture. Industry's full of vultures. Industry's shady. This is in the hit song we're doing this. So that shows me like a little bit of like he's able to weave something that's like I would consider conscious, right,
Mm-hmm.
into a hit track, and for it to not even stand out. It doesn't even. You can listen to the entire song and not even realize that he's saying that. It's something that shows the craftsmanship, bro. You gotta be a certain type of dude to do that and be like, yeah, I'm just gonna throw in this part about like how they kind of screwed the Cold Crush Brothers and we actually need that money back. Where is that? H did that. It's
Literally.
out.
Right back to that. Yeah, I think it's so interesting because that's now a phrase that you hear often when something comes up that's like around someone not getting not getting their just due. Like
Mm-hmm.
when De La Soul was going through their thing, you always heard someone say, yeah, what they did to the Cold Crush. Like it's like reference to the fact of like these old heads not
Mm-hmm.
getting their just due. Do you have any more lyrics? Because right now you're segueing me into the next topic. So do you have any
Yeah.
more lyrics
No.
or okay, so this is another part of why this album is very important is because Jay-Z was the first kind of financial king in hip hop from a
Mm-hmm.
rapper's perspective. The execs had done made him plenty of money off of everyone. We just talked about the Cold Crush Brothers. So Diddy was a big part of that bling era, that shiny suit era. I think making a lot of money, but as much as he was an artist, he was an executive. We had not seen the actual rapper, the actual artist, you
Mm-hmm.
know, own the label, in the way that Jay-Z had and become as rich as Jay-Z is. Like now we just know Jay-Z is being extremely wealthy. That's just normal. But
Yeah.
at that point, that had not happened yet for any of these artists. And so that's kind of part of Jay-Z separating himself from his peers at that point. He didn't have the success to separate himself. He was not the best selling out of all these guys,
Mm-hmm.
but his moves becoming the president of Def Jam, his moves in terms of business,
Rockaway.
that set Rockaware, the Sean Carter shoes too, that's the
Mm-hmm.
S dots. Like those things set him up to become what he became. So I think that's the biggest part I think about when I'm talking about how this affected his career, is because this was the beginning of that. This album is what led him, to that Def Jam spot, to the breakup with Dame. This all culminated in that because let's compare it to the NBA. In the NBA in the '90s, Michael Jordan had some of the biggest contract the NBA had ever seen,
Yep.
but that was not the norm. And when you look at what Michael Jordan made in his career compared to what guys make in their career now, complete different story, complete
Yep.
different story. But Michael Jordan was the kind of Jay-Z in a scenario where he set the precedent for like people can make this much. And after Michael, there was Kobe. When Kobe got his 2 years, $50 million in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
that was like, you couldn't even imagine someone getting a contract like that. You fast forward to now, dudes are 23 years old
Mm-hmm.
getting $200 million contracts. And so it's like Jay-Z was that person of like, I'm gonna be the first to get all this money, show how much rapper can make, because as much as rappers had become successful at that point, they had not become extremely wealthy.
Yep.
And so this was the beginning of that. And this album really solidified him. Like, okay, he beats with Nas and survived. The Chargers came to him and he's still here. He's still putting out music. So that to me is, I think, what cemented him. And I didn't mention this earlier, but before this album was, a lot of songs that were more of the dancey vibe. Like I Just Want to Love You with him and Pharrell.
Mm-hmm.
That was the album before this one, the Dynasty Project. The song Big Pimpin', which is, part of this whole Waiting for My Charges deal. Like those are the songs. Okay, he can do these big kind of poppy hit songs, but as well give us the real rap, which is what most of Blueprint is. They're not really that like big pop crossover hit in the same way. Even H to the Izzo, you can't play H to the Izzo right now at a function and get a response.
Yeah.
If you're in the right place with the right people, for sure, but that's not really the big crossover. So for him to have the success of this project or that crossover, this is a project that solidified him as like, okay, he's here. He's
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, exactly. One song you could play is like Big Pimpin'. Big Pimpin' you can play.
Big Pimp you could definitely play. You could definitely play.
Oh man. So yeah, I think the thing about Jay-Z becoming uber wealthy is like I think he is kind of like, a person who was like trying to having the grind set, trying to get their money up,
Mm-hmm.
not their funny up. Um,
The grind set. Yep.
yeah, the Jay-Z's kind of like an archetype that is allows you to be looked towards, right? Even just like as an artist, you'd be like, okay, what did Jay-Z do, right? And he kind of like templated for people,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that very few artists can say that that they've done, that they could template a way to become successful.
Mm-hmm.
So he's super uber important in that way. From having the own record label, being the president, like you said, stuff that people still do now, like Rockaware. Like, what do you think? What do you think Tyler the Creator is doing? Like, he's making his
Mm-hmm.
own Rockaware, right? So it's still,
Even the shoes. Look at what Travis Scott's doing.
yeah, even the shoes, right? So it's still everything that he was doing then was still relevant, right? That influence is still, even though it's beyond the music, that
Mm-hmm.
influence on the genre, on the culture in that aspect is enormous. It's actually just outsized impact is so crazy. Because talking about like the Cold Crush brothers, they didn't have any shit like that. Zero,
Nope.
zero,
Nope.
zero, 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 nothing like that. The money you got from the label was it. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to survive off that, right? So that's outside of the music, the influence of Jay-Z is enormous when we're talking about the blueprint and stuff like that. Because even on the cover, right,
Yep.
he's wearing a Rockaware jersey. If you really look at it on the
Mm-hmm.
back, it says Rockaware on it,
Yeah.
right?
And you're sorry to cut you off, but to
Yeah.
mention like the Rockaware he's wearing, like this was very much of like him promoting his brand and his worth as like a brand ambassador. Like I think it's the ruler's back where he mentions Gucci flip flops
Mm-hmm.
and hat to the side. I got my jersey on.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is all like he's selling all these things to us. Like he's like, yeah, I'm cool. I wear this. Y'all can wear this too. And then the cover. This is a very very iconic cover, but I think this cover fits into like Jay-Z's persona at this time. Like there's a there's a joke about how much time he called himself young on this project because at the time of this project he's older than both of us,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind of an old man, an older man in a young man's game, and this was the beginning of bringing that like grown man style into hip hop. So this cover really goes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, it's like a very nice shade of blue and the black, which is
Mm-hmm.
usually something that people would say don't really go together. It's really like it's a beautiful shade of blue. I don't know what shade, I don't know what color that is particularly, but that looks mint. And also you can see like the people's shoes
Mm-hmm.
along the upper right, whereas like he's like the boss talking to a bunch of people, and he's like having a cigar, and obviously the ruler's brag take over, right? All this stuff is feeding into that idea of like, you know, the ruler's back, and also he's the boss. I'm the boss here.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else is kind of a peon. I'm the boss. So
Yeah, that's what he was selling.
yeah, so that the cover is phenomenal. Probably one of his best ones, and I think there's like that video where you see him doing all of his covers in a row.
Yes,
This is
yes.
probably like one of the best ones, even when he's doing it. So I think that yeah, this cover is like iconic. I would say. I think it's so important.
Yeah, no, super iconic. I think this is part of Jay-Z's, self-awareness that he's always had.
Mm-hmm.
Like himself as a leader, as someone who people look to, as someone who sets trends. That's something you can only do this cover if you are aware of those things with yourself.
Right.
Like everyone's being like, yeah, he's the guy we want to be. So this is even more that self-awareness. Let's talk about the cohesion of this project. Like
Yeah.
as a full project, how do you feel about it?
I think it works super well. I don't think that I don't. At this time in hip hop, they weren't really doing the seamless transitions into each
Mm-hmm.
other, that we see more of right now. But it still goes together well. I still get a New Yorkie vibe. The soul samples are doing good work. I do feel like the sequencing from the ruler's back takeover into Izzo is like a weird section. Like objectively,
Very.
objectively, that's a very weird section to go from intro track, diss track, hit, hit song. Like that's just like a weird, that's just weird sequencing. Um, but other than that, it's pretty good. I think that there is still like an old school New Yorky soul sampley vibe to the entire thing, and he maintains that. So I think that the cohesion is pretty good. It's not seamless, but it's very good. Definitely very good for the time, 2001. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would say it's just okay. I think that, it is cohesive in terms of his content. I feel like the idea of him like telling a story, explaining who he is, giving you more insight to what it means to be Jay-Z, that's all over here. So I think content wise and actually what he's saying, there's some cohesiveness there, but I think production wise, it's a little bit all over the place. I think that
Oh, you
like
think so?
there are sections that are cohesive, like, from Heart of the City to All I Need. But songs like Girls, 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 Jigga That Nigga,
Yeah.
You Don't Know, like these really give more like loose singles vibes than like part of a cohesive album. And I think it's funny this album has done so well. It's way more 444 than it is the Black Album when you look at it in
Yeah.
hindsight. But this is kind of like the value of Jay-Z's voice. Like Jay-Z's voice is an instrument unto its own that can carry a project. Like that's really what's carrying all of these songs is like his voice, his storytelling, his delivery. Because there aren't really any of these beats that like you hear and you're like, let's go. Like there's no production on here that gives it. You Don't Know is probably the closest.
Yeah.
And then that Jay-Z is part of that. He comes in as soon as the beat comes in, and then that's where the hype comes from. So I think cohesive is probably the weakest part of this project. Looking
Okay.
at it from an objective
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, I guess so.
Because it's like there are a lot of good songs on here, but it's like the story is just his rapping. That's what the cohesive story is. Production wise, not as much.
Yeah,
My
it's
my
definitely a
mm,
collection of like, well, at this time, remember when we talked about, I think I was on the previous podcast where we were talking about where we're currently today, 2023, we're at a
mm,
time where being the most technically proficient at anything is not really enough to break
yeah.
you out or make you stand out or anything. But in 2001, that was the thing in hip hop,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It didn't matter. I mean, the production, like, it was cool, but it
Mm,
was really who can rap the best. Who is the best rapper? Who has the best storytelling? Who has the best flow? Who can do, multiple rhymes, schemes? Who can do any of this shit, right? That's what it was about. So the blueprint is a showcase of that, right? I could do it on Soul Sample. I can make a hit.
yeah.
I can make 2 hits. I can make 3 hits. I can do a part 2, right? I can do the part where I'm singing the hook, where somebody else is singing the hook. I can make it triumphant. Like, that's really where the blueprint is like collection. Like, it's a big collection of like some of the best versions of Jay-Z in a lot of different ways. And like there isn't much style. The stylization comes in the production, right?
Yes.
But he raps it straight up. Like there's no
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's no
He's
auto
not getting his
tune.
Drake on. Yeah.
There's no singing it. There's no beat switches, right?
No, no beat switches. No.
Yeah, there aren't really any beat switches either. Like it's really him just straight up. And like you gotta, that's why I said like he's a person, him, and then you gotta arrange shit around him to make sure the song is good and then it gets shipped. Because he can do it on his own, but that's when you get a song like Lyrical Exercise. This is the least streamed song, right? It's a good track, but you can't do that 15 times in a row. Like it's just not gonna
No,
work.
no.
So that's when I think about the cohesion is like it's actually because of a different time of hip hop that it suffers in cohesion, but this was what we're trying to, it was a prove it a little bit, in hip hop. And like if you're dropping your album, you're dropping your hardest songs and you gotta do best flow, best flips, best schemes, all that type of stuff. And not really like trying to do your 808s and heartbreaks where all the songs flow together. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I
Yeah,
feel about the cohesion.
and I think too, this is something that is just extremely not the case today.
Mm-hmm.
Is back then we were excited to hear what someone had to say.
Yes.
That's kind of why I started talking about where he was in his career of awaiting two criminal trials, being dissed by a bunch of great rappers, coming off some big success with the Dynasty Project,
Mm-hmm.
Rockefeller like forming into its own here from the Memphis Bleak a lot on this project. Like you wanted to hear what the rapper had to say of like where they're at, where they're going through, what's going on. That is not really the case anymore. I feel like we hear from these rappers and hear stuff about their life and their past and kind of get stuff revealed in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kendrick revealing stuff about his life, J. Cole revealing stuff about his life. But it's not as much as I want to hear what they have to say as a whole, you
Yeah.
know? And that's kind of what this project is like people just want to hear what is he saying? Where is he at? Where is he at
Mm-hmm.
mentally? What does he have to say? So that I think is a huge part of why this project is the way it is. Because if this was, in the present, like here's an example. The third blueprint, which came out in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
very different energy than this blueprint. A lot more features, a lot more bigger records,
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very much kind of, I don't say prisoner of the times, but it shows the time that this project was made in.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, before we get to the vinyl, Jay-Z made this album very quickly. The rumor is that he did it in 2 weeks, recorded 9 songs in a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So this again, we hear a lot of people nowadays was like, yeah, I recorded this in a weekend or a week, and there are albums like that. Y'all not Jay-Z. Y'all not Jay-Z. Y'all not putting out timeless classics in a weekend. Only Jay-Z's doing that. So that's nothing to mention, but let me know. Are you gonna be getting the vinyl? Would you
You
be
know,
getting the vinyl? I think the answer is obvious, but I want to hear it.
I think going back and listening to the entire thing, yes, I will be searching for it if it exists.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. That's the
Let
thing
me
now.
find
If
my
it
Jay-Z
actually
vinyl
exists,
while you say that.
if it exists, I will try to figure out a way to cop one. If it does not, the thing is whether or not I was thinking if it exists. I was like, okay, well, maybe it only exists on CD because it's 2001. But as it exists, if it exists, I'll grab one. Um, there you go.
This is not the blueprint
This
as you
is
guys
not
can
the
see on
blueprint.
YouTube,
Yeah.
but this is the Jay-Z vinyl to me. Blueprint, I think, obviously is in that
Does it exist
realm.
on vinyl?
I've never seen it. I've never
Yeah, it
seen
might
it.
only be on CD or
Yeah, which
cassette
is
because it's 2001, so it might even be on cassette.
yeah, cassette and CD. I I don't know that I would get this vinyl, honestly. I don't know that I would get this vinyl. I think there are a lot of moments on here, but this
Mm-hmm.
is not like a all the way through album for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I probably would not get this vinyl even if it was available.
Okay. Okay. What about your score? Because we're still, ooh, yeah. We're still scoring. These are, they wouldn't count against like your canon score,
Yes.
right? Like I have like a 10 out of 10. I think I gave
Mm-hmm.
Illmatic a 10 out of 10, but I'm not gonna count that
As a
in
10 out
like,
of 10 you gave. Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
as we hear it today, what is your score?
I think this is an 8 for me.
Okay.
Um I would say it didn't sound as good as I thought it would when I went back to listen to it.
Same.
I feel like I was more nitpicky, which I don't love, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I mentioned earlier about his rapping ability carrying this through, like that is kind of the test of a true artist in terms of a rapper for sure. Like most rappers are closer to poets than they are musicians,
Mm-hmm.
and like his poetry is very consistent throughout and carries it through. And there's a lot of substance in what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's consistent in terms of his content and his subject matter, but he's actually saying a lot of things on this project. And I guess we have hindsight because we saw a lot of these things come true or prove to be more true,
Mm-hmm.
or even like the Kokosh Brothers line, like how well that aged.
Mm-hmm.
But this album is a very good project. This would not be my choice for a Jay-Z project to suggest to someone. That's gonna be my
Yeah.
question to you after your score. But this is gonna be an 8 for me for Jay-Z the Blueprint. What about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say an 8.5 for me. I think that the rapping is like A1, obviously, but when it comes to the production style, you can now like, even though it was 2001, so again like 20 years ago, there is a pace that is really different. Like it's slower. The music is slower, and also
Mm-hmm.
even though a song like The Ruler's Back or what was the other one? Not Heart of the City. You Don't Know.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are supposed to be like hard hitting. Like I sense that it's supposed to be like, like
Yeah, that's a goal.
yeah, like it's supposed to be like I'm just like it's more of like like instead of like, punch a wall, it's more of knock on wood, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit not, I think current production styles have made it so that a song is, if you really want to get people like skin or like hair
Mm-hmm.
raising on people's skin, there's really really effective ways of doing that. Think of like Magnolia, commas,
Yeah.
Look at
Fiend.
Me by X, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like the 808s, the buzzing 808s, the trap drums, and like the yelling on the track and stuff like that. Like those are stuff that shit didn't exist in 2001.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very different.
Right? So that stuff that probably back then, like you don't know, must have been like
Yeah, that was it.
like now that's like a okay, yeah, I guess, like this, it's pretty solid. Like it's like a good rap track. Like it's not hammering
Mm-hmm.
you like it would back then. But other than that, I think it's very good, bro. I think that there's very little for you to point at and be like, this is like this kind of sucks. Like he doesn't really, there's
Mm-hmm.
not really nothing that I don't love. Like there's nothing that I hate. There's just
Yeah,
like tracks
yeah.
where I'm like, it's okay. Like girls, 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 it's all right. The second version
Yes.
is better, even though the first one is the hit song, and also the singing
Makes
kind
no
of sucks.
sense. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right about like the difference in a hype song
Hmm.
from then till now. Like my quintessential hype song of the 2000s is Never Scared by Bone Crusher.
Yeah.
That is like probably the song that like ages the best in terms of like if I could hype you up today. Like you
Hmm.
could play Never Scared and March Madness back to back and you'll stay hype.
Yeah.
You know. You Don't Know is not really in that vein. So I like that you brought that up of like that just wasn't even a thing
Hmm.
back then. Now, last but not least, this may be the only Jay-Z album we review in the history of this podcast because who knows
Yeah.
when
When
he's
he's dropping
dropping
another.
again. We may do an anniversary at some point, if something happens, but
Hmm.
this may be the only Jay-Z album we review. So if you have someone in your life who is not familiar with Jay-Z, doesn't understand why he's the GOAT, what the whole rave is about,
Hmm.
what is the album that you would suggest to them? And then on top of that, is there a song that you try and show people who are like new to Jay-Z or aren't aware of why he's so loved? So album first, and then if there's a song on top of that that you would suggest.
Yeah. I still would tell you to listen to Reasonable Doubt, the
Mm-hmm.
first one. I still would be like, this Reasonable Doubt is like such a good starting point. Even if you're just like new to hip hop, I would be
I
like,
was gonna
this is,
say the same thing. Yeah.
if you're just like, you want, like, let me recommend you like just like a straight up hip hop album, like you just want to get into it. Reasonable Doubt and like Illmatic would be would be like my first ones that I give to you. And I think song, if I was gonna give it to you for Jay-Z, that's hard because there's a song like "Niggas in Paris" with Kanye West,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't say that that's like quintessential Jay Z. That's
No.
a tough
But
question. I guess
It's a
That's a
tough one.
tough
It's a tough
question.
one.
Yeah,
It's a tough
I
one.
think I would
No,
still
well,
go ahead.
no, I'll say we can come back to you and I can give you
Yeah,
mine and then we can come
yeah,
back
you
to
go
me.
ahead.
So, Reasonable Doubt, I think is probably one of the best albums ever created. So
Hmm.
I can't argue with that choice at all. You're in my good books.
Hmm.
For any Reasonable Doubt love, we can always be aligned. I would probably suggest the Black album
Okay.
as for a new Jay-Z fan, just because I think that's more palatable because it's newer. They have the good chance to know a couple of songs on there.
Hmm.
So that would be my choice.
Dirt off your
And
shoulder.
my They're Off Your Shoulder, public service announcement, change clothes,
99 Problems.
encore, if they're a Linkin Park fan, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, but the
Oh
song
yeah,
that I
that's
would
good if you're a
probably,
rock fan. That's a good crossover.
yep, yep. My suggestion, I think, for a song that I would suggest someone if they're new to Jay Z, is probably 99 Problems. Um,
Okay.
I think 99 Problems is like, first of all, it's a banger, like just a good song. But it's a song where you can enjoy it without totally getting the lyrics, like you don't have to really fully get what he's saying and you can still enjoy the song. But if you are someone who's into lyrics and you listen to what he's saying, you can kind of peep, okay, this guy is a little deeper than the regular rapper I'm used to. Says a
Hmm.
little bit more. So 99 Problems probably be my suggestion. And it's like, even though it is 100%, I don't want to say stealing, but interpolation of Ice Cube,
Hmm.
um, it's doesn't sound dated, like that doesn't sound super super old or like it came out in the 90s or something. So 99 Problems I think would be the one I would suggest.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? I'm just gonna double down on what I say here. Just give him Dead Presidents too. I think that's just it. I
It
think that is
is.
the root. I think that's the root of Jay Z is that style of production. Like it's a boom bappy style of production. I think it still has like this New Yorkness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're getting like the slippery part of Jay-Z when it comes to the flows. It's still like it's just butter, man. Like that track is like such a when the
Mm-hmm.
hip hop Hall of Fame, hopefully there will be one. Maybe we should make our own. But
Mm-hmm.
that is like in the hip hop Hall of Fame. That song is in the hip hop Hall of Fame.
For
So
sure.
so that's what I would say. Dead Presidents too. Okay.
Yeah, Dead Presidents 2 is a good answer. I think there's probably 10 songs that you could show someone
Hmm.
to get it. And the thing about Jay-Z is Jay-Z, even though he's extremely popular, he hasn't been low key for I don't know, 30 years now.
Hmm.
But he has a unique rap style. His rap style isn't like what you're used to if you don't listen to rap. I think that's something that has to be taken into account as well. But listen, this has been an amazing, amazing podcast. For all the people who have somehow not listened to this album, please get right. Listen to the
Hmm.
albums we're suggesting, listen to the songs we're suggesting. I want to hear what you guys think. Make sure you follow us on the interwebs at Album Mode Pod on Twitter, at Album Mode Pod on Instagram, at Album Mode Pod on TikTok. Of course, all our YouTube people, show us some love over there at Album Mode. Like, comment, share, and of course, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to see us go up the rankings on your podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Leave us a rating and a review, not a single star or less. Of course, we're going to have new reviews for you next week, like we do every single week. And
Hmm.
until next time, know yourself, know your worth.
Later days.